Good morning, brothers and sisters from sunny Central California. I'm Brother Warren Gubler. My wife and I served recently our missions in Auckland, New Zealand. We worked in the area offices where I served as Associate Area Legal Counsel. We had terrific missions there. We loved the people. The church was terrific. The country was very beautiful. But as happens when you come to the conclusion of a mission, you have to return home. We've enjoyed being here and seeing our family and our friends once again, but we will always miss New Zealand. In November 2019, I had the blessing of speaking at New Zealand Education Week in in Hamilton, New Zealand. And then in 2020, I spoke to FSY in Auckland. So it was great being there in person. I wish we could be there with you today. Fill up your spirit, have that dialogue, but we'll just have to use the miracle of technology known as Zoom to share my points and my comments with you today. So with that, I'd like to bring up and share with you a PowerPoint presentation which will help us discuss this important topic. Let me start with the themes that you see in front of you. The first phrase is by the sweat of your brow. We all recognize that from the Old Testament, where Adam and Eve are being evicted from the Garden of Eden. And the Lord told them that they would have to work thereafter and earn their bread by the sweat of their brow. Then we also are familiar with the phrase, put your shoulder to the wheel. This is one of our beloved hymns. And as we read and sing from that song, we all have work, let no one shirk, put your shoulder to the wheel. And finally, the law of the harvest. This is a phrase that dates back, as far as I know, to the beginning of history. It's one of those common sense phrases that deals with the farming experience that people had. People historically have had to raise their own food and provide for themselves. And the law of the harvest, another way of saying that is, that which a man soweth, so shall he reap. Or in other words, you will reap what you sow. If you want to have a good harvest, you need to plant and take care of the seeds and watch them grow, fertilize, and eventually you'll have a good harvest. Likewise, if you don't take care of your crops, you'll not have a good harvest. So the topic which I've chosen to share with you today is as follows: the Little Red Hen principle, teaching our youth the value of work. Sometimes in this day and age, our youth are so caught up in entertainment, with enjoying themselves, with being popular, that they miss out on this important principle. So I'd like to emphasize why work is so important and what you can do as parents to instill that value in your children. I'd like to share with you some comic strips as part of my PowerPoint presentation. I find a lot of humor in comic strips, and I find that also they will have a lot of truth contained therein. So let's first look at the perspective of our teenagers. This comic strip called Zits will illustrate that. Zits is another name we use here in the US for acne or pimples. And so it's kind of a funny name for this comic strip. Here you see our young hero, Jeremy, who feels like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders, sort of like Atlas. And Jeremy says, plus I also have to haul the trash cans to the curb and empty the dishwasher once a week. And his friend Pierce says, dude, this place would fall apart without you. Isn't that how our teenagers think sometimes? That they have a lot of responsibilities and everything, the world seems to rotate around them. Now let's look at the parent's perspective. And I think this next comic strip will illustrate that. Here's a dad going into his son's bedroom. The son is playing video games and dad says, you want to check out this new game? You try to acquire riches and battle evil forces as you advance through a strange and mysterious world. The son says, sounds awesome, Dad. And then the dad pushes him out the front door. In other words, right outside his room is what the real world is like, not what is on that computer screen. So anyway, As parents, our point of view is a little bit different, that maybe our youth are spending too much time on video games, and they really need to get outside and experience life. Let me share with you the story of the Little Red Hen again, if I could. We all have heard this story. The Little Red Hen is a hard worker. She's the one that gets the job done. She finds some grains of wheat, and she decides that she wants to plant the wheat. And according to the story, what does she say? She says, "Who will plant this wheat? Who will help me?" She has 3 friends. The cat says, "Not I." The dog says, "Not I." And likewise, "Not I," said the mouse. So the Little Red Hen planted the wheat. The Little Red Hen also harvested the wheat. She also had it milled. And each time she went to a new phase of the job, she would ask her friends to help her. And eventually she took the flour that came from the wheat and made a cake. And she asked, "Who will help me eat this cake?" "I will," cried the cat. "I will," cried the dog. "I will," cried the mouse. In other words, her 3 friends wanted to benefit from her labor. They wanted to have the reward without sowing the wheat, without doing the work that was necessary in order to end up with that wonderful cake. What does the Little Red Hen say? The Little Red Hen says, "No, you won't help me eat it. I am going to eat it." Well, was the Little Red Hen really being selfish there, or was she perhaps trying to teach her friends a lesson? I would suggest she was teaching a lesson. And this is the same type of lesson that we need to teach to our children. Because as the story ends, the Little Red Hen has other jobs as well. And after her 3 friends find out that they don't get the reward without putting in the labor first, they are very eager helpers. Well, let me illustrate this story further by showing you this picture. This is a picture of an acre of land which is next door to our house in Central California. We've had it leased out for many years to a family from Southeast Asia. They're very hard workers. They grow strawberries on that land. They have a little fruit stand, and our rent is that we can go next door and get strawberries as much as we would like to eat. It's kind of nice. And this is kind of a situation where we're not really the ones that are doing the sowing, but we're reaping the benefits by virtue of owning the land. So the option is we can go to the fruit stand and get baskets of strawberries anytime we want, or we can go out in the field and we can pick some. Well, one morning on my way to work, I came up with a brilliant idea. It was a Monday morning, and I talked to my wife, Elisa, and said, "Elisa, let's have a family project. I've got to run to work, but would you mind getting the kids up and going out and picking some strawberries? And tonight is family home evening, and we'll make strawberry shortcake." And she thought that was a great idea. I took off to work, as husbands will do, without thinking that maybe I should have stayed at home and helped pick those strawberries. Be that as it may, I got a call later that morning from my wife, and she indicated that the kids had got out and helped pick the strawberries, except for our oldest daughter, Amanda. Amanda was 9 or 10 at the time, as I recall, and Amanda had decided that she'd rather sleep in, that it wasn't necessary for her to help and go out and pick those strawberries. And Lisa talked with me about it and said, "What shall we do? Should we punish her?" And I said, "Well, I'm at work right now, but let me think about it, and we'll figure it out tonight when I get home." So when I got home, I decided that for our theme for Family Home Evening, we should discuss the story of the Little Red Hen. And I took the storybook, the same one which I just showed you, and I went through the whole story with the children, with Elisa. And when it concluded, I said, "Now we are going to have strawberry shortcake for dessert." And my daughter, Amanda, her eyes got big. She had these beautiful blue eyes and blonde hair as well. And she said, "Dad, you're not going to do what I think you're going to do, are you?" And I said, "Yes, I am, Amanda." And so Mom brought the strawberry shortcake in from the kitchen, and we all enjoyed it except for Amanda. And Amanda got the cake and she got the whipped cream, but she didn't get any strawberries on her strawberry shortcake. And Amanda realized that she needed to correct the error of her ways and was very repentant. The next morning, Amanda and I, before I went to work, went out and picked some more strawberries. And that night we all had strawberry shortcake together. So I chuckle when I think of that story. And Amanda will always remember that. And I might say that Amanda turned out to be a wonderful young lady, a very hard worker, and she understands the principle of work, hard work. What do some of our church leaders have to say about the principle of work? Elder Maxwell says, "We likewise speak of working out our salvation, of the law of the harvest, and of the sweat of the brow. These are not idle phrases." He says, "Instead, they underscore the importance of work. In fact, work is always a spiritual necessity, even if for some work is not an economic necessity." Isn't that kind of an interesting concept, that last sentence? There's some people out there who have sufficient means, wealth, where economically they could probably not work for the rest of their lives. But spiritually, Elder Maxwell is saying, spiritually, they still need to work because it's a benefit to them. And if you stop and think about it, it really is. In retirement, I find that sometimes it's easy to let the days go by. It seems like every day is Saturday in retirement, but it's good to have chores. It's good to have work and to keep busy and to accomplish things. Well, let's read about Adam and Eve a little bit more. The Lord said, "Cursed is the ground for thy sake. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to thee. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread." And Adam began to till the earth and to have dominion over all the beasts of the field and to eat his bread by the sweat of his brow. And Eve also, his wife, did labor with him. Was, again, the Lord trying to punish them? I would submit that, in fact, the Lord was blessing the lives of Adam and Eve by giving them this opportunity to work. So let me share with you an example from my life where I had the blessing of learning how to work. When I was a boy, I mowed the lawn for the family. That was my job. I started when I was about 10 years old. And after a while, I felt that I had gotten pretty good at it. And I asked my dad if I could get paid for mowing the lawn. My dad said, "Well, that's part of being or in our family. We feed you, we clothe you, you have a roof overhead." And I was adamant that I wanted to be paid for mowing the lawn. So what did my dad do? He went out and got me a job with Miss Sprott, a widow down the road, and I mowed her lawn. And she paid me, and then I would mow my lawn as well for no cost, for no payment. And so for a while, I had these two lawns to mow. I then got up my courage again to talk to my dad. I said, "Dad, I really think I should be paid for mowing the lawn." My dad, being very wise, went out and found me another lawn job. And so every Saturday I was mowing 3 different lawns, 2 of which I was being paid for. The one at home I was mowing, and the payment was food, shelter, clothing, and being a part of the family. You know, that was an interesting lesson that I learned. We don't always get paid financially for the work that we do, but work is still important because there's so many blessings in our lives that we receive from understanding the value of hard work. So I've got a little problem here. Let me see if I can share this again and go on to the next screen. Here we go. I'd like to share with you 3 work concepts. The first one is Work gives our youth a feeling of self-worth and develops confidence. Developing a work ethic will prepare our youth for their chosen careers. And work will provide our youth a means to support themselves if they learn to manage their resources. Let's talk about each of those work concepts one at a time. First, work gives our youth a feeling of self-worth and develops competence. Okay, I'm going to show you another Zitz cartoon here. Here's our friend Jeremy, our teenager, calling for his mom. He's yelling from his bedroom. He says, "Mom, I can't sleep. I don't know what's wrong. I'm lying here in my own bed, but I can't keep my eyes shut. I just don't feel tired. What do you think is wrong?" Mom looks at her watch and says, "It's 1:15 Saturday afternoon. You've been asleep for the past 13 hours. And Jeremy throws his arms up and says, "I'm cured." And then here we have one additional cartoon. Jeremy's at the store with his father, the electronics store, and he's mulling over some choices. He says, "The replacement cable is $16, or I could just get new speakers for $80. I think I should get new speakers. It's only money." And then he turns around and looks at his dad and says, "It's only your money." So let's look at a 40-year Harvard study. This is kind of interesting to me anyway. This study began in 1938. In this study, researchers at Harvard University in the United States selected 456 young boys who were inner city youth in Boston, Massachusetts. And they followed the lives of these young boys for the next 40 years. They would test them every 2 years to see what progress they had made. And this test went well into the 1980s. And by that time, these young boys had reached middle age. They were in the prime of their lives. They had obtained education, and they were in the middle of their employment years. What did this Harvard study show us after 40 years of following these young boys every 2 years? Those highest on the boyhood activity scale, or those that had learned how to work and hold down a good job, were twice as likely to have warm relations. We're going to pause for just a moment if we could. We're back on. I had to put the power plug back in. Let me go back and share the screen where we left off. Thank you for your patience. So those highest on the boyhood activity scale were twice as likely to have warm relations, to be well paid, 16 times less likely to be significantly unemployed. Well, what about those who had worked the least in boyhood, those that had not been taught to do family chores and had not been taught the value of work? They were far more likely to have been arrested, 10 times more likely to be mentally ill, and 6 times as many had died. According to this study, IQ, amount of schooling, family, social, and economic class made no real difference in how the boys turned out. What were the conclusions of this Harvard study? When these young boys were compared at middle age, one fact stood out. Regardless of intelligence, family income, ethnic background, or amount of education, those who had worked as boys, even at simple household chores, enjoyed happier and more productive lives than those who had not. Boys who worked in the home or community gained competence and came to feel that they were worthwhile members of society. And because they felt good about themselves. Others felt good about them. Okay, so this is our first principle, that we develop competence and we develop good self-esteem from learning how to work. Let me share a couple of examples. This is a picture of my son, Edmund, when he was 14 years old. Ed and I home taught Sister Wilcox. She was a widow in our ward, a wonderful lady, didn't have a lot by way of financial savings and means. She did have her own home. One evening, the street sweeper who was employed by the city, which we lived in at the time, fell asleep at the wheel. And so he drove his machine off the road, crashed into her car that was parked there, and then tore out much of her fence and did other damage. Now, luckily, Sister Wilcox had insurance, and the insurance monies paid for the repair of her car and most of her fence. But there weren't enough monies to go around to finish repairing the gates and putting everything back together again. So Sister Wilcox contacted her home teachers, we call them ministers now, and Edmund and I went over and evaluated the situation, and we decided that we could maybe help her out. She'd gotten a quote for $500 for these repairs. Instead, we went down to the local hardware store. We purchased a little bit of cement, some new posts, hinges, some nuts and bolts, took our toolbox down there with these particular items, parts, and it took about 2 or 3 hours, and we were able to put together the rest of her fence. We used and salvaged parts from her gates as best we could. And when we were done, this is a picture of what we had. It looked just as good as it had before, and we were able to save Sister Wilcox that money. Instead of paying $500, it cost us $20, which Ed and I donated to the cause. So Ed had a good experience. He was able to render service. He developed some more competence by learning how to put together gates and this particular part of the fence. And it's served him well in life. Ed has grown up to be a hard worker, and I'll tell you more about Ed in a bit. And I should say that I learned some new competence there. I had to study out a little bit on how to put these gates and this fence together. And it was a good experience helping Sister Wilcox. Here's a picture of a washer and dryer. Just before our mission to New Zealand, our dryer broke down. My wife's instant thought was to contact the repairman. And I said, wait a second, I think I could do that. This is an older dryer, and it will cost us as much to repair it as what it's probably worth. So I got onto YouTube, did a little bit of research for 4 or 5 minutes, and determined that I felt that the belt had snapped around the drum of the dryer. So we went down to the hardware store, paid $8 for a new belt. I opened up the dryer according to the YouTube video, which I watched. In fact, the belt had broken. I put the new belt on, reassembled the dryer, and it worked good as new. It still works to this day. Again, we could have afforded to have a repairman come and do that, but I wanted to see if I could learn something new, and we did save a little bit of money just prior to our mission. So again, I felt good about it. I learned some new competence, and I had an increase of self-esteem, and I've mentioned it several times to my wife and family about what a good dryer repairman I am. Let's go on to our second point. Developing a work ethic will prepare our youth for their chosen careers. Here's our friend Jeremy again in our Zitz cartoon. Jeremy's on the computer. His parents are in the background. He says, "There, I found you guys a probate attorney. You know, just in case you haven't set up my trust fund yet." The dad says, "Right, we'll get right on that." And Jeremy says, "Hey, it's expensive out there." The next day was the follow-up comic strip. Jeremy's talking to his parents again. He says, "I really don't have a trust fund?" Dad says, "No." Jeremy says, "That seems a little unreasonable, don't you think?" Unreasonable? Jeremy says, "You can't just rely on my wife to support me." And Dad says, "What part of the word job is confusing to you?" Well, too many of our young people have had that very experience, that they haven't really had a job. They have had everything given to them, and they expect life to be easy. And the reality is that life isn't always easy, and that we do have to make our own way in life. President David O. McKay said, "Let us realize that the privilege to work is a gift, that power to work is a blessing, and that love of work is success." And President Hinckley, our beloved former prophet, said, "The major work of the world is not done by geniuses. It is done by ordinary people with balance in their lives who have learned to work in an extraordinary manner." Okay, we don't have to be geniuses. We just need to know how to work in an extraordinary manner. Give it our best effort. I'll tell you a quick story. A few years ago, I came home from work on a Saturday afternoon. I had to put in some overtime, and everyone was scurrying around the house. I asked what was wrong, what was going on. They were all putting things away, cleaning up, which on a Saturday afternoon was not the normal activity. Well, my wife said that CBS News had called and they were going to be at our house in 15 minutes to interview us and film our family. I thought it was a joke. I sat down to read my newspaper, and then I heard the knock on the door a few minutes later. In fact, it was CBS News. CBS is one of the 3 major networks in America that reaches well over 300 million people. Anyway, CBS News had a news story which they called "Everybody Has a Story." It was on weekly. They would send a team out to visit various parts of the country. They would determine where to go by throwing a dart at a map of the United States. Wherever that dart hit, they would then travel to that city, or the closest city to where the dart hit. They would then open up the phone book and at random select a name. And in this case, they had selected the Gubler name. They were delightful company. They had a crew of cameramen, a director. They followed us for 3 days. They followed us to school, to work, to church. Everywhere we went, that camera crew was. And then they took all this film and they boiled it down to a 3-minute segment, which they showed on national TV. I wish I could show that to you. Unfortunately, I don't have the technology to do that today, but it was a little bit worrisome. When you have a young family full of energy, there's lots of warts, there's lots of silliness that goes on, and you don't know quite what the news crew is going to end up with. Well, it turned out that the news crews decided that they wanted to emphasize and talk about my being a bishop at the time, as well as being an attorney, how I had a young family, and I was trying to teach them the principle of hard work. It was on national TV, as I said, morning and evening. We got so many comments about that. It was good publicity for the church as well. The story made clear that I was a Mormon bishop. And our children still enjoy talking about their moment, their 15 minutes of fame as a result of that story. So what happened to these little children that grew up to be adults? Well, Amanda, up in the left-hand corner of your slide, you recall she was our oldest daughter who refused to pick strawberries, at least on one occasion. She learned hard work. She was very successful through her schooling endeavors, and she is now a school psychologist in Idaho. The next child was Rachel. Rachel was so much fun, and she had a wonderful, bubbly personality, enjoyed the social aspect of her schooling very much. She's now a successful wife and mother, has 4 children, our grandkids. She delights in helping her children be the best that they can. She contacts us often with pictures and video chats of the things that she's doing with her children to help them through their education. In fact, that's our oldest granddaughter, Cora, and there she is playing one of the children in the Von Trapp family in The Sound of Music, and she acted in that play not too long ago in her community. Edmund, I introduced you to him a while back in this presentation where he was my home teaching companion. Well, Edmund grew up too. And Edmund enjoys life, loves to see the world. This is a picture of him at Machu Picchu in Peru. Ed just finished dental school and is now in his residency. He is very competent, very good at working with his hands, and is a very good thinker, knows how to put in the time to get the job done. And I have no doubt that he will be a successful dentist once he finishes up his residency. In the upper right-hand corner is a picture of our daughter, Kimberly. Kimmy loved to sing. And so she took every opportunity to have voice lessons, to perform in plays, in community productions, and just a beautiful, beautiful trained voice. She went on to get her degree in music education and teaches high school choir and is influencing the lives of many young people in the area of music. The bottom right-hand corner is our daughter, Laura. Laura was the athlete in the family, and if there was a sport, she was going to be involved with it. Succeeded in all of them, all county in some of her sports. Graduated from high school, decided she wanted to go off to college and focus on her schooling and take a break from sports, which was okay with me. And then she calls us about a week after she arrives at BYU Provo to let us know that she had made the girls' rugby team. She had never played rugby before. She played on the varsity girls team for all 4 years, and her senior year at BYU, they actually won the girls' national championship in rugby. Had a great career, went on a mission to Arizona, became fluent in Spanish, and now she's a high school Spanish teacher as well as a tennis coach at her high school. And she continues to influence many, many people, including these young people who she teaches. So they have all been successful in their different and varied careers. And I attribute a lot of that to not only their good mother, but to being taught the principle of hard work. They had goals, they had aspirations. In the United States, we have a columnist known as Ann Landers, and people can write into her at the newspaper, and they can share their thoughts or they can ask for advice, and Ann will write back. And this is a very well-known column in American newspapers. One lady I recall who wrote in talked about her children, and she was disappointed in how they had turned out. She basically said that she had given her kids the best of everything. They didn't want for anything. In essence, she had spoiled them, and she hadn't taught them how to work. Her children had no ambitions. She wrote, "My dream was for all our children to be educated and have great careers. I would have supported them in any dream they wanted, but they had no dreams." I would suggest that developing a work ethic also develops ambition in our children. Our children have to have dreams. We shouldn't give them everything, but give them the opportunity, the blessing of learning how to provide for themselves as appropriate. And our third and final point that I'd like to discuss with you is work will provide our youth a means to support themselves if they learn to manage their resources. Well, let's go back to our friend Jeremy in our Zitz column strip, or cartoon strip, to illustrate the point. Dad looks in on Jeremy in the bedroom and says, "Jeremy, do I get any change back from the $20 I gave you last night?" "Oh yeah, about that," Jeremy says. "The movie was $8 and Sarah was starving, so I got the jumbo popcorn. That was like $6, and Hector, another friend, borrowed a $5. After the movie, we walked by the food court where there was the most incredible pizza just coming out of the oven. Then we all went over to the bookstore for, we'll say, hot chocolate. And Dad says, "So I owe you?" Jeremy says, "Give me another 20 and we'll call it even." Okay, is it really necessary for us to finance our youth and in particular their leisure activities? And what happens once they have earned the money if we don't teach them how to properly manage their resources? Here's one other cartoon strip. It's entitled The Wizard of Id. It's supposed to be back in the Middle Ages. And the farm wife is talking to her farmer husband. She says, "We really need to start a retirement plan." The husband replies, "I already have. I plan to win the lottery." That was his plan. He hadn't saved anything. In the next little part of this cartoon strip, we see the farmer husband going in to see the gypsy and her crystal ball to have his fortune told, I guess. He says, "Will I ever win the lottery?" The gypsy says, "Let me see." She looks into her crystal ball. "Yes, you'll win $1 million." "No kidding," the farmer says. "What will I do with it?" The gypsy says, "You'll buy $2 million worth of stuff and go bankrupt." "Oh no," the farmer says. And the gypsy concludes by saying, "Too bad. You should have quit while you were ahead." Okay, managing their resources. That's an important aspect. If we just teach them how to work hard without teaching them how to save, how to invest, how to spend their earnings on that which is important, then we have done a disservice there as well. One particular writer by the name of Fred Gossman said, "A wise young mother said, 'I choose not to give our children what I can afford to give them. I hold back for their sake.' Children who always get what they want will want as long as they live." So let's share these words also by Elder Joe J. Christensen, one of our former general authorities. And he talks about the importance of teaching our children to work and to provide for themselves. He says, "We live in a world in which many children believe that if it's not fun, it is boring and not worthwhile. Even in family activities, we need to strike a balance between play and work. Some of my most memorable experiences while growing up centered around family activities, learning how to shingle a roof, build a fence, or working in a garden. Rather than being all work and no play, for many of our children, it is almost all play and no work. As a consequence of overindulgence, many children leave home ill-prepared to meet the real world. President Hinckley said, 'Of course, we need to earn a living. It is important that we qualify ourselves to be self-reliant, particularly that every young man at the time of marriage be ready to and able to assume the responsibilities of providing for his companion and for the children who may come to that home. All too many enter marriage who never learn to cook, sew, or develop other important skills. Ignorance of these skills, along with the lack of understanding of the management of money, sow the seeds for many failures in our children's marriages.'" Okay, sow the seeds. Now we're back to the law of harvest, but there can be some negative consequences by failing to teach our children how to work and how to provide for themselves. Again, children who develop a strong work ethic will develop competence. They'll develop self-reliance, according to Elder Christensen, and they'll be able to provide for themselves. Have we taught our children basic skills, such as mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, taking care of a home? If not, the sin be upon our heads as parents. Elder Neil A. Maxwell said, "I remind you that the gospel of work is part of the fullness of the gospel. Though joyful, missionary work is work. Though joyful, temple work is work. Alas, a few of our underwhelmed youth work all right, but mostly at trying to please themselves." Okay, I can testify that missionary work is hard work. I will tell you that I've talked to a number of returned mission presidents, and I like to ask them what the difference is, if any, that makes certain missionaries very successful in the mission field. And with almost without exception, the mission presidents will say that those young people who came into the mission field having already developed a work ethic are going to be the most successful in sharing the gospel and getting the job done there in the mission field. Let me see if I can wrap this up by asking you this question: what gets you up in the morning? I heard this question posed by Stacy. She was one of the young single adults that we worked with in the Takapuna ward there in Auckland. She was speaking in sacrament meeting one Sunday, and she related this experience that she had. She said that she had gone to uni or university that day, and her professor had asked the class this very question: what gets you up in the morning? Stacy said that her first impulse was to say, "Oh, my alarm clock gets me up." But then she thought about it some more and reflected, and she said, well, if I don't get up in the morning, I'll miss the lecture. And if I miss the lecture, I won't do well on the test. And if I don't do well on the test, I won't pass the class. If I don't pass the class, then I won't get my degree from uni. And if I don't graduate successfully, then I won't be able to find good employment related to my field of study. So according to Stacy, what got her up in the morning was that desire to succeed, to get that degree, and to go out there and make the world a better place. I ask you the same question. What gets you up in the morning? What gets your children up in the morning? Do they have ambition? Do they look forward to a new day where they'll be able to go out and do their best and work hard and achieve? I believe that this is an important question which we should ask ourselves, perhaps on a daily basis. What is it that we're striving for? What is it that gets us up in the morning? I hope it has to do with being successful, with pursuing our ambitions, and in particular for today's purposes, that we are mindful of our responsibilities to teach our youth the importance of hard work and setting goals and having ambitions. So let me just conclude by reviewing the three concepts or principles which I've shared with you today. The first point is work gives our youth a feeling of self-worth and develops competence. Number two, developing a work ethic will prepare our youth for their chosen careers. And number three, work will provide our youth a means to support themselves if they learn to manage their resources. Let me conclude by just bearing my testimony of the importance of the concept and the value of work. This is something that hopefully we have learned so that we can instill it in our youth. And if we do so, if we focus on this principle there, and mind you, we don't want to get out of whack here. There's lots of important things we need to teach our youth. But one of the most important concepts I would suggest to you is that we should be teaching them the blessings of hard work, that they shouldn't be trying to get out of work, but they should be learning new competences, that they should be out there developing those work skills so they can be successful in whatever they decide to do temporarily as well as spiritually in this life. Thank you again for your time today. I'm thankful for this opportunity I had to participate in New Zealand Education Week in 2021, and I wish you all the best. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.